I still need you.
Hey, welcome to part one of our technical series. We've decided over the next few race weekends and things to talk you through some of the really cool stuff we do in our team. We're going to go deep into how we do data logging, how we do electronics on bikes. We have some really cool sensors on our bikes where we can monitor things like tire temperature and tire pressure remotely. So when we have our bikes in a race weekend, we have 4 bikes, 2 Yamaha R1s, 2 Yamaha R3s. We never actually have to do things like test the tire pressure. We can do it all remotely from my computer here, which is really cool. So over the next few race weekends, we're going to go through different technical solutions that we have for cool stuff. But I'm here getting ready for Karlskoga. I'm in the workshop, and the next thing I need to do is change oil. So I thought, how about we just take a few moments to talk a bit about the oil products that we use and why we choose them. There's a lot of myths around oil, why you should use a certain oil product. One person has their favorite here. One person will tell you that you should use a 10W30 because it's X, Y, and Z. The next person will tell you to use a 1550 because it's X, Y, Z. I hope today I can just briefly explain some of those myths, help you understand what sort of oils you should be picking, and then you can make up your own mind. Alright, so let's get started. When I'm working on bikes, especially race bikes, I want to make sure that I'm picking an oil that's absolutely perfect for the bike. In my opinion, especially like Yamaha, they've got a lot of very good engineers that build these bikes. They know a lot more about engines than I do, so I'm going to listen to them first, before I listen to anyone else out there. So what I do is I go to the manual. You'll see I have the Yamaha service manual for the R1, and it recommends the brand, Yamaha Lube, the type, a 10W40 or a 15W50. We'll talk about this straight after, what this actually means. Recommended engine oil grade, API service SG type or higher, or JSO standard MA. So we'll talk a bit about what they mean. A lot of people look over and ignore the engine oil grade, and that's what I'm going to touch on today, and this is how you can really get a lot of details of actually how good the oil is. So let's first of all start about these 4 oils I've got sitting out here on the bench. Based on all these specifications, once I read the back of these, the worst oil here is this Gulf on the left hand side. This is still an amazing oil. This Gulf 10W40 works in nearly all applications for motorbikes, so by me saying worst oil does not mean it's a bad oil, but based on the specifications of each of these, this is the best and this is the least out of all of them, and then they go up in order. So the first thing we'll talk about is the weight of the oil. You'll see these two here are 10W40. This is a 10W50, and this is a 1550. And let's talk a bit about what that actually means. The easiest way to consider this is the W actually stands for winter. A lot of people will tell you it stands for weight or something like that. W stands for winter. So this is how the oil performs in a cold temperature. And then the number after the dash is how it performs in hot temperature. The lower the number, the runnier the oil is. So when these are both sitting at the same temperature, say cold at 10 degrees, this oil, the 10W40s, will actually, and the 10W50, will all have a runnier viscosity than the 15. The 15 will actually be thicker at cold temperature. Now it's important if you're driving, say, a car in minus 30 degrees and stuff, that you have calculated for that. Now different car manufacturers will say, no, you need a 10 weight in the winter or a 0, like I know Ford, for example, will recommend a 0 in the winter. And that's a little bit based on the car manufacturer or the bike manufacturer. But in this case, all you're looking at here is what this does in the cold. On race bikes, we're normally not out in minus degrees. So going for something like a 15 weight is perfectly fine if that's needed or if that's a chosen weight you have. Next then is the top one. So you'll see when the bike is very hot, this is a 50 and this is a 50, it means that they'll have a bit of a thicker film, okay? At a high temperature, let's say 100 degrees, these will still have a thicker viscosity than these two. Now in some cases you'll want that, in some cases you'll want the thick viscosity, sometimes you want a runny viscosity. For me on the R1, I'll tell you why I choose the oil I do later, but the R1 with the design of it and how it's built with the crossplane crankshaft, it is advised that you have a slightly thicker oil just to help protect those crank bearings. So you'll see later what oil we choose for that. So once you've chosen your viscosity, the best thing to do here is, for me, if it's a standard road bike, I use exactly what they suggest. If it's something like a race bike, sometimes I'll go up to 50, just to give me that slightly more protection at high temperature. But again, most of the time, just what they recommend for the road is more than good enough. But this is when things start to get very interesting, and where a lot of people make mistakes, and they don't understand why you have to pay more, for example, a motorcycle oil, because Gulf will sell a 10W40 Syntrack 4T for a motorbike and a car, and I guarantee the car is cheaper. So what you'll find, a lot of people have a friend that works in some car mechanics workshop, and he can get you a lot of oil for cheaper. But let's talk about why that might not be such a good thing. Alright, so let's take a read at the back of some of these oil bottles. The first thing I want to look at is the specifications here. Hopefully you can see this. So here on this one you see specifications API SL and JSO MA. Now API, actually I can't remember exactly what this stands for, but this is like an American Association grading scale. And JSO is a Japanese Automotive Standards Organization or something like that stands for. So it's a Japanese standard. Now the JSO specification comes in two very clear. You've got the JSO M, which is what we have here, the MA, or the JSO MB. These are very, very different. Some motorbikes, like a BMW or a Harley Davidson, the clutch is the oil for the clutch is in a different compartment than the oil for the engine. So if you have an oil that has friction material in it, for example, then that isn't going to damage your clutch. But on something like these Yamaha R1s, it's very important if you have an oil that has like a friction material in it, that it doesn't touch that clutch of yours, or your clutch is going to start to stick. It's not going to slip like it should, and you're starting to you'll start to run out your clutch and damage your clutch. So the MA, which is what all of these oils are specifically for a motorbike with a wet clutch, and they have additives in it specifically for wet clutches. So they perform, the slipper clutch on your bike performs exactly as it should. It helps you get off the line and starting procedures and things, and it doesn't wear out your clutch. So it's very important if you're picking oil for a wet clutch bike that is a JSO MA at minimum. We'll talk about then there's a level above MA. The API specification, it's not quite as easy. For me, I suggest just going online, and if we look at my computer screen here, if you really want to see about the API specification, you'll see here there's a grade. You'll never find anything less than SJ anymore, so you'll see where my finger is here. So you have SJ, SL, SM and SN, which is the very top grade API specification. All this is telling you is how high quality the base oil is, and we'll talk a little bit more about the base oil. For me, when I'm looking at oils, I think because it's a much easier one to understand, I look for the JSO specification. I just make sure it's an MA, if it's a wet clutch, and then we can go to an MA2. So this is where some of these will differ. So here I have a JSO MA. If I go up to the next oil, same spec, it's a 10W40, same weight, should work perfectly in the engine, but we'll see this is actually an MA2. So you'll see in big letters they advertise MA2. They also put it here, JSO MA2. Now all oils that you buy, they have what they call a base oil, and then they add lots and lots of additives and stuff to that oil to help clean your engine, maybe to help, as I said earlier, friction material or anti-friction material for wet clutches. But the base oil is very important, and you'll hear people talking about synthetic oil or ester oil. MA2 is a fully synthetic ester base oil. So that means it is a fully synthetic oil. It's not something natural out of the ground that's just being sort of welled and added to. It is synthetically produced to be the highest standard possible. So you can just confirm with the synthetic oil that it meets very, very strict requirements. It performs much better in high temperature situations, but also increase and decrease, rapid increase and decrease in oil. So if you really want an ester based, fully synthetic oil, you should be looking for an MA2. And that's just guaranteeing that base synthetic oil. So that's really why this oil is better than this oil. We'll put it this way. I guarantee 95% of most applications this is going to work perfectly fine if it's a 10W40 you want. But if you really want to confirm that the base oil that's used is the very best quality out there, you'll go for something with an MA2. If we go up to the next model of Gulf, this one, which is their official Superbike oil, so you'll find they sponsor, for example, Aprilia in World Superbike. You'll see in their specifications now in their Superbike Oil, it's a JSO MA2. So also this one, the weight changes. It gives you a 50 weight, which just means again at very high temperature the oil is a little bit thicker, which will give you a slightly thicker oil film, which helps sort of coat those bearings and help protect those sort of engine bearings and crank bearings and stuff on the bike. Which is why this is the next step up from, say, the Silk Clean here. Then we go to the very top one, the Silk Clean 15W50. It's a JSO MA2. Again, we can see on the side, JSO MA2. So it's an ester base oil. And really the only reason I've put it at the top is for me, especially with racing, I tend to choose a 15 weight for cold because I don't need it to be super runny. I don't really want it to be super runny when it's cold. I would like it to be a little bit thicker, again, especially on something like the Yamaha or like a Ducati, which really does wear out their crank bearings a little bit more. I prefer to have that slightly thicker oil in a cold temperature. So, what do I use in our race bikes? Well, based on everything I tell you, I want to make sure I get a really good oil, one that's recommended by the manufacturer, so I know the wheel weight or the weight of the oil, but also I know that the specification is as best as it can be to make sure that these bikes run for as long as possible and also perform. Don't forget, if you're choosing the wrong oil, you'll lose horsepower. Your bike over time will start to, maybe this oil will start to clog up oil filters and things. So I want to make sure I use the best possible oil I can. So based on all of that, I decided to go for Yamaha Lube. I have a nice selection here of Yamaha Lube that I've got. Yamaha Lube provide things like parts cleaners, brake cleaners, chain lubricants and many more. I'll pick this one because this is what I put in our R1s. So you'll see I went for the 15W50. Even though the specifications on the screen say I can go 1040 or 1550, I think if it was a road bike I'd probably just go 1040. It's a little bit cheaper, but for me with the R1 using it in a race scenario, I want that little bit more protection at high heat. If I was someone chasing maximum horsepower, actually having a slightly thicker oil at temperature will lose you a little bit of horsepower, like tiny amounts. So if I was someone that really wanted super duper horsepower to these, I'd maybe go for the 1040. But in this case where I want to really protect the engines, I want to make sure I'm using an oil that's recommended by the manufacturer. In Norway here it's really easy to get Yamaha Lube. Any Yamaha dealer will get you Yamaha Lube. It's easy to get. I can always get the same oil. I don't have to go running around the country trying to find the same oil as last time. I stick to the Yamaha Lube. As I mentioned, Yamaha also have a lot of other products. All their spray cans that you saw earlier, and you can pick up any of these catalogs at any Yamaha dealer just to really understand what products you get with Yamaha and their suggested oils. So we use them all. I just want to make sure we choose the best oil for our bikes, and you can't go wrong when you're actually using the oil that the manufacturer themselves recommend. So that's it really. I'm now going to go and change the oil in this bike, get it ready for me and Carl at Karlskoga. We've also got two R3s out in the Super Sport 300 and the Junior Sport 300 ready to get oil changed and get fully serviced. So we'll do that this weekend to get ready for next weekend at Karlskoga, and I hope to see you there. And I hope to see you back for all the rest of our tech talks, which will be much more in-depth and technical about the sort of electronics and stuff on the bikes. You'll see these two boxes we have here. We have boxes here full of spare parts just to get a bit more of an understanding of what it takes to run a race team. We will go into detail about the sort of spare parts we bring with us, the amount of tyres, the amount of wheels and stuff we bring in a race weekend. So I hope that sounds good, and I hope you check us out soon. Thank you.